The funeral home smelled of lilies and grief. I stood alone in the corner, watching as people I barely knew approached my son-in-law, Robert, with embraces and whispered condolences. My daughter Jennifer's photograph smiled from beside her closed casket, that radiant smile I'd never see again. She was only 32. I hadn't cried yet. The shock was too complete, too consuming. 3 days ago, Jennifer had called me about meeting for lunch next week. Now she was gone. A sudden aneurysm, they said. No warning, no goodbye. Mr. Walsh is saying some lovely words about Jennifer, whispered an elderly woman beside me. I nodded mechanically, not bothering to correct her that Robert wasn't speaking about Jennifer. He was talking about himself, about how he would persevere through this terrible loss. I'd noticed that pattern since the moment he called to tell me Jennifer had died. Everything circled back to him. I made my way toward the casket, needing to be near my daughter one last time before they closed it forever. As I approached, Robert's eyes met mine. Something cold flashed across his face before he composed it into grief again. He had never liked me much, but I had tolerated our strained relationship for Jennifer's sake. "Barbara," he said, his voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear, "perhaps you should step outside. You're looking unwell." I wasn't unwell. I was shattered, yes, but standing firm. Before I could respond, he had signaled to one of his brothers who guided me, firmly but politely, away from the casket and toward the exit. "Just get some air," the brother said. "It's what Jennifer would have wanted. But Jennifer would have wanted me beside her. She would have wanted her mother's hand on hers one final time." The service ended, and we all migrated to Jennifer and Robert's colonial-style home in Newton, the house they had bought 3 years ago when Robert's architectural firm had taken off. I had helped them with the down payment, emptying half my retirement account because Jennifer had fallen in love with the garden and the window seat in what they planned to make a nursery someday. People filled the living room with quiet conversations and occasional laughter that felt like a betrayal in a house so recently emptied of my daughter's presence. I sat alone on a kitchen stool, watching as Robert moved between groups, accepting sympathy with practiced grace. Not once did he look my way or acknowledge my presence. As evening approached and guests began to leave, I remained. This was my daughter's home. I needed time here, surrounded by her things, before facing the empty apartment that awaited me in Framingham. The last guest departed around 8. Robert closed the door and turned to me, his expression completely transformed. No trace of grief remained. "I've packed your things," he said flatly. "My things?" I couldn't understand. "What things, Robert?" He disappeared into the hallway and returned dragging my old Samsonite suitcase, the one I'd left in Jennifer's closet with a few spare clothes for visits. "Your things," he repeated, dropping the suitcase at my feet. "It's time for you to go now, Barbara." "Go? But Jennifer," my voice caught. "I thought I might stay a few days to help with arrangements, to be in her space." Robert's laugh was hollow. "This isn't her space anymore. It's mine. And I no longer need a mother-in-law." I stood trembling. "Robert, my daughter just died. She was my only child. Please." "When my wife died," he interrupted, emphasizing each word, "my obligation to her family ended, especially to you." He stepped forward, towering over me. "Jennifer complained about you constantly, you know, how you smothered her, called too often, asked too many questions." The words struck like physical blows. Jennifer and I had spoken nearly every day. We had our disagreements, certainly, but she would never have said such things. "That's not true," I whispered. "It is true, and now that she's gone, I can finally tell you that you're no longer welcome here. Not today, not for Christmas, not ever again." He opened the front door, the cool evening air rushing in. "Take your suitcase and leave forever." I stood frozen, unable to process the cruelty unfolding before me. My legs wouldn't move. "Leave," he repeated, "or I'll call someone to remove you." Numbly, I took the handle of my suitcase, the weight of it nothing compared to the heaviness in my chest. As I stepped onto the porch, Robert spoke one last time. Don't contact me again. Jennifer would have wanted a clean break. The door closed behind me with a decisive click. I stood on the porch of my dead daughter's home, holding a hastily packed suitcase, with nowhere to go but my empty apartment 15 miles away. It wasn't until I reached my car that I noticed something odd. The suitcase felt too light, and the handle. It wasn't my suitcase at all, but Jennifer's old one, the one she'd taken to college years ago. Somehow, in his rush to expel me from his life, Robert had made a mistake. I drove home in silence, the wrong suitcase beside me, wondering what secrets it might contain, and why my son-in-law was so desperate to erase me from his life on the very day we buried my only child. The suitcase sat untouched in my living room for 3 days. I couldn't bring myself to open it, as if breaking the seal would somehow finalize Jennifer's death in a way that even her funeral hadn't. But on the 4th morning, after another sleepless night, I knew it was time. I sat cross-legged on the floor before it, running my fingers over the worn blue fabric. This was the suitcase I'd bought Jennifer when she left for Boston University 12 years ago. She'd been so excited, so ready to spread her wings, while I'd pretended to be strong for her sake. With trembling hands, I unzipped it. Inside weren't my belongings as Robert had claimed, but Jennifer's things. A folded sweater I'd given her last Christmas, her favorite scarf, a small jewelry box, and beneath them a stack of papers held together with a binder clip. I lifted the sweater to my face, inhaling deeply, desperate for any trace of my daughter's scent. Then I set it aside and reached for the papers. The first document was a life insurance policy. Jennifer had taken it out just 6 months ago, a $2 million policy with Robert as the sole beneficiary. I frowned. Jennifer had never mentioned this to me, and it seemed excessive for a young couple with no children yet. The next paper was a bank statement showing a transfer of $450,000 from Jennifer's personal account to a joint account 3 weeks ago. Below it was another statement showing that same amount moved again, this time to an account I didn't recognize, with only Robert's name on it. My breath caught. Jennifer had inherited that money when my sister passed last year. She'd told me she was saving it for when they started a family. As I continued through the stack, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Medical records showing Jennifer had visited a neurologist twice in the past month. A handwritten note in her familiar script. Headaches getting worse. R says it's stress, made apt with Dr. Levine. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the papers. The next document was a printout of an email from Jennifer to her friend Melissa. I found something strange on R's computer. Need to talk to you in person. Don't trust phones. The email was dated 3 days before she died. At the bottom of the suitcase was a small flash drive labeled Backup, Jay's Files. I sat back, my mind racing. Jennifer hadn't died from a random aneurysm. She'd been having symptoms. She'd been worried about something on Robert's computer. And now Robert had a $2 million insurance payout and access to her inheritance. My phone rang, startling me. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Barbara? This is Melissa Porter, Jennifer's friend." Her voice was hushed, urgent. "I've been trying to reach you. Robert told everyone you were too distraught to talk, that you'd gone to stay with relatives in Florida." "I'm not in Florida. I'm home." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Thank God." Melissa's relief was palpable. "Listen, Jennifer came to see me the day before she died. She was scared, Barbara. She found something on Robert's laptop, emails to a woman named Diana Kovacs. They've been seeing each other for over a year." The room seemed to tilt around me. "An affair?" "More than that. They were planning something." Melissa hesitated. "Jennifer said there were messages about insurance, about how they'd be free soon. She was going to confront him that night." I thought of the insurance policy in my lap, the medical records, the transferred money. "Barbara." Melissa's voice dropped even lower. "I think Robert might have hurt Jennifer. I tried telling the police, but they said there was no evidence of foul play. The medical examiner ruled it natural causes." "I have evidence," I said, looking at the papers spread around me. "Jennifer's medical records, financial documents, and a flash drive." "Be careful, Robert's been asking about you. He came to my house yesterday, asking if I'd heard from you. He seemed desperate." After hanging up, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It contained dozens of files, photos of Jennifer and Robert, their wedding video, tax returns. And in a folder labeled RW Backup, I found what Jennifer must have discovered, hundreds of emails between Robert and a woman named Diana dating back 14 months. I clicked on one from 2 months ago. Everything's in place. Jay increased her life insurance like I suggested. Once it's done, we'll have the payout and her inheritance. The medical examiner won't question an aneurysm with her history of migraines. 2 months, my love, and we'll be free. My hands were ice cold as I continued reading. There were more emails discussing Jennifer's headaches, which had started becoming severe around the same time. References to medication adjustments and increased dosage. They had been poisoning my daughter. A sharp knock at my door made me jump. I quickly ejected the flash drive and slipped it into my pocket. Through the peephole, I saw Robert standing in the hallway, his face set in a concerned expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Barbara," he called through the door. "It's Robert. I've been worried about you. Please open up." I stepped back, heart pounding. How had he found me? I'd moved to this apartment after my divorce 3 years ago, and I was certain Jennifer had never brought him here. "Barbara, I know you're in there. I can hear you moving around." His voice hardened slightly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I brought you the wrong suitcase by mistake. I have your things in the car." The wrong suitcase. He'd realized his error and now knew I had Jennifer's personal items, possibly evidence of his crime. "Just open the door so we can talk. I'm concerned about you, about how you're handling Jennifer's death." I remained silent, backing away from the door. My phone was on the coffee table, beside the scattered papers. I needed to call the police, but I couldn't risk him hearing me. "Barbara!" His fist pounded the door harder. "Open this door right now, or I swear to God." He caught himself, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle once more. "I'm just worried. That's all. Jennifer would want me to check on you." I stood frozen, watching the doorknob jiggle as he tested it. Thank God I'd engaged the deadbolt. "Fine," he finally said. "I'll come back later when you're feeling more reasonable." I listened to his footsteps retreating down the hall, but I didn't trust it. Silently, I crept to the window and peered through the blinds. Robert wasn't leaving. He was sitting in his car in the parking lot, watching my apartment, waiting. I grabbed my phone and Jennifer's documents, retreating to the bathroom, the one room without windows. With shaking fingers, I dialed 911. "I need help," I whispered when the operator answered. "I have evidence that my son-in-law murdered my daughter, and now he's outside my apartment." The police arrived within minutes, but Robert was gone. They took my statement and the evidence, the emails, the financial documents, the medical records. The detective, a woman named Martinez with tired eyes and a gentle manner, listened without interruption as I pieced together what I believed had happened to my daughter. "We'll need to get a warrant for his electronic devices," she said when I finished. "And we'll have the medical examiner review your daughter's case. But Mrs. Collins, I need to be honest with you. Proving homicide in cases initially ruled as natural causes is extremely difficult." "He killed her," I insisted. "For money, for another woman." Detective Martinez nodded. "We'll investigate thoroughly. In the meantime, I'd advise you not to stay here. Is there somewhere safe you can go?" That night, I checked into a motel under a false name, using cash. I couldn't risk going to a friend's home. Robert knew all my friends through Jennifer. I lay awake most of the night, clutching my phone, jumping at every sound in the hallway. The next morning, Detective Martinez called. "We executed a search warrant at Robert Walsh's residence early this morning. He wasn't there, but we confiscated his computer and found additional correspondence with this Diana Kovacs. We're bringing her in for questioning." "And Robert?" "We've issued an APB. His credit cards were used at Logan Airport 6 hours ago. We think he's trying to flee the country." And my stomach knotted. "So he's getting away with it." "Not necessarily. We've flagged his passport, and Mrs. Collins, we found something else at the house. medication containing high levels of arsenic. We're requesting an exhumation order for your daughter's body." The exhumation was approved 2 days later. I couldn't bear to be present, but Detective Martinez called me afterward. "The preliminary toxicology results show elevated levels of arsenic in her tissue samples," she said. "It's consistent with long-term poisoning, which could have weakened blood vessels and contributed to an aneurysm. The ME is changing the manner of death to homicide." I sat down heavily on the motel bed. So I was right. Yes, and we've located Diana Kovacs. She's cooperating to save herself, claiming Robert told her Jennifer had a heart condition that would take care of itself. She's given us access to all their communications. 3 days later, Robert was arrested at a hotel in Toronto. The Canadian authorities had identified him trying to cross into Quebec with a fake ID. He was extradited back to Massachusetts to face murder charges. I watched the news coverage from my apartment, still struggling to process everything. The reporters painted Robert as a calculating killer who had slowly poisoned his wife while carrying on an affair, all for financial gain. The story made national headlines, with reporters camped outside the courthouse during his arraignment. Robert pleaded not guilty, of course. His lawyer tried to argue that Jennifer's death was indeed natural, that the arsenic came from supplements she took for her migraines. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the financial records, Diana's testimony, and most damning of all, the searches found on his computer. Arsenic poisoning symptoms, how to mimic natural death, aneurysm causes. 6 months after Jennifer's death, I sat in the courtroom as the jury delivered their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Robert showed no emotion as the judge sentenced him to life without parole. As they led him away, he looked at me for the first time since the trial began. There was no remorse in his eyes, only cold hatred. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones at me, asking how it felt to see justice served. I had no words for them. Justice wouldn't bring Jennifer back. Detective Martinez escorted me to my car. "You should be proud," she said quietly. "Without you finding that evidence, he might have gotten away with it." "I'm not proud," I replied. "I'm just empty." In the months that followed, I moved through life mechanically. The insurance company, after a lengthy investigation, released Jennifer's policy funds to her estate, not to Robert. As her only living relative, I became the beneficiary. The irony wasn't lost on me. The money Robert killed for ultimately came to me. I couldn't keep it. It felt tainted, blood money. After much thought, I established the Jennifer Collins Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence and funding research on poisoning detection. If Jennifer's death could save even one other woman, perhaps there was meaning to be found in the senseless tragedy. A year after Jennifer's death, I received a letter from prison, Robert's handwriting. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me read it. "Barbara, by now you've taken everything from me, my freedom, my future, even the money that should have been mine. I hope you're satisfied. But know this, Jennifer never loved you the way you thought. She tolerated you because that's the kind of person she was. She pitied you, alone in your sad little apartment, clinging to her because you had nothing else. She told me she wished you would find your own life and stop trying to live through hers. She was planning to cut you off gradually. I just accelerated the process. Think about that every night before you sleep. Robert, I read the letter twice, then set it down on my kitchen table. A year ago, these words would have devastated me, but now I recognize them for what they were, the desperate lies of a cornered man, making one last attempt to hurt me from behind prison walls. I knew my daughter. Jennifer and I had spoken almost daily. We'd had lunch every Wednesday. She'd called me first when she got her promotion, when she and Robert bought their house, when she was considering starting a family. She wouldn't have confided such things to someone she merely tolerated. I folded the letter and slipped it into a folder containing all the case documents. Then I picked up my keys. It was Wednesday, the day I now volunteered at the women's shelter funded by Jennifer's foundation. There was a new arrival today, a young woman who had finally found the courage to leave her abusive husband. She would need support, understanding, and practical help to build a new life. As I drove to the shelter, I thought about what I would tell this woman, that healing isn't linear, that some days the grief and anger would be overwhelming, but that eventually she would find purpose again. I hadn't forgiven Robert. I never would. But I had found a way to channel my pain into something meaningful. Jennifer would have wanted that. At a red light, I glanced at the passenger seat where a framed photo of Jennifer sat, not the formal one from her funeral, but one I'd taken on her 30th birthday. She was laughing, her head thrown back, joy radiating from her face. That was how I chose to remember her. The light turned green, and I continued forward. In my rearview mirror, I could see Jennifer's old blue suitcase in the back seat. I kept it with me now when I visited the shelter, filled not with painful evidence or sad memories, but with resources for women starting over, brochures, gift cards, toiletries, small comforts. Robert had intended that suitcase to be my burden as he cast me out on the night of Jennifer's funeral. Instead, it had become both his downfall and my purpose. Sometimes the most devastating endings can lead to unexpected beginnings. Jennifer had taught me that in life, and somehow, in her absence, she was teaching me still.